I'm a 28-year-old woman, and when I was 13, my parents left me at a gas station to teach me a lesson. They never imagined I'd take that lesson seriously. It happened during one of those long, sticky summer road trips. The van was packed, 2 siblings, a cooler full of melting sandwiches, my dad's country music playing just a little too loud. We were somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a stretch of cracked road framed by flat fields and heat shimmer. I asked for water, and my mom told me to run inside and grab a bottle. I hopped out, jogged into the gas station, found a cold bottle from the fridge, and walked to the counter with a couple of crumpled bills. I remember thinking I'd beat my siblings back to the van. I actually smiled. But when I stepped outside, the van was gone. At first, I waited on the curb. 5 minutes. Then 10. I walked around the side of the building, thinking maybe they pulled up to the air pump or went around the back. Nothing. I checked inside again. Still nothing. The cashier asked if I was okay. I told him my parents were probably just messing with me. I waited 30 minutes on that metal bench outside the door. Then an hour. The sun moved, shadows shifted, and the cars that came and went were never the right one. The cashier let me use the phone behind the counter. I dialed home. No answer. I tried my mom's cell, then my dad's. I left a voicemail. Another hour passed. The cashier called the local police. When the officers showed up, I gave them everything I could remember. Full names, our street address, what the van looked like, what everyone was wearing. One of the officers stayed with me while the other made a few calls. They offered me a juice from the mini fridge while I waited. 6 hours after I'd been left there, my parents pulled back into the lot. No speeding, no panic. They parked like they were stopping for fuel. My mother stepped out first, adjusted her sunglasses, and asked the officers what the big deal was. She told them it was discipline, that I'd been acting out, and they thought I needed a wake-up call. A reminder of what happens when you're careless or forget to follow directions. My father just nodded along, arms crossed. The police didn't press charges. They said it was a parental overreaction, but that no law had technically been broken. They warned my parents not to do anything like that again. I sat in the backseat of the van the whole drive home, silent. No one said anything to me. My brother laughed the next morning and said I looked like a scared puppy when they finally picked me up. My sister rolled her eyes and told me to stop being dramatic. At school that fall, I didn't tell anyone what happened. I just became quiet, focused. I turned in my assignments early, stayed out of group activities, ate lunch alone when I could. I stopped expecting birthday cakes or bedtime hugs. I stopped expecting anything, really. I started preparing, quietly. I kept granola bars in my backpack, just in case. Learned how to open my bedroom window from the outside using a fork. I began hiding emergency cash in an old DVD case. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I just knew I needed to be ready for the next time I was left behind. We never spoke about the gas station again. Not even once. It became one of those family moments that got edited out, like a bad photo. Everyone moved on except me. I never really had a choice. When I turned 18, I applied to every out-of-state college I could afford the application fee for. I got into 6 states away. I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and left the morning after graduation. No party, no photos. No one helped me load the cab. My mother was watering her plants when I left. My father didn't look up from the television. I moved into a dorm with strangers and never went back. Over the years, I built something for myself. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. A job I earned without any referrals. An apartment I furnished one thrifted chair at a time. Friends who hugged hello and remembered my birthday. People who noticed when I was quiet and asked if I was okay. No one ever left me standing alone in a parking lot. I didn't cut my parents off completely. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't change mine. But I never called. I never messaged first. The last time I saw them was 3 years ago, at a cousin's wedding. They smiled like everything was normal. Like I hadn't spent hours alone at 13 wondering if I'd been kidnapped or forgotten. And now, 15 years later, something's happened. Something big. Something that dragged them back into my life after all this time. They're about to learn what it really feels like to be left behind. For good. Last week, I got a call from my mother. It came through in the middle of a workday. I saw her name on the screen and froze. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 3 years. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, she called again. Then she texted, just one line, please pick up. It's important. I stepped outside and answered on the 3rd ring. She was crying. Not soft, quiet tears. Full-on sobbing. She said my father was sick. Stage 4 cancer. They'd found it late. It was in his lungs, his bones. The doctors said it wasn't curable. Maybe 3 months. Maybe less. She asked if I could come home for him. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I told her I needed time to think and ended the call. That same evening, my cousin Lucy messaged me. She's the only relative I've stayed in contact with. We text now and then, mostly about work, pets, and neutral things. I hadn't told her about the gas station incident. I never told anyone in the family. I didn't want the drama. Lucy confirmed the diagnosis. She said it was true. My dad was really sick and things were moving fast. He was already on oxygen. He was struggling to walk without help. I told her what my parents did to me when I was 13. Everything. The trip. The bottle of water. The missing man. The 6-hour wait. The police. She went silent for a while, then messaged back. They never told anyone. I thought that was just a rumor. She said the family always treated me differently, like I was breakable, or a problem, like I needed more effort than I was worth. She admitted she'd heard jokes about me being too sensitive, too emotional, that I cried too easily, that I took everything too seriously. I didn't respond for a while. Instead, I pulled out an old box from the back of my closet. It was full of letters and cards I had kept over the years. My birthday cards were always generic, just names and signatures. No messages. My graduation card had a single line, good luck. I found my old journals from middle school. I hadn't read them in years. The entries were hard to get through. I'd written about how I wanted to feel wanted, how I stayed quiet so they wouldn't snap, how I planned every move to avoid being seen as too much. That night, I called my therapist. I've been seeing her off and on since my early 20s. I told her about the call, about the diagnosis, about everything it pulled up again. She reminded me that closure doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means telling your story back to yourself and owning it. The next morning, I called my mother. I didn't say hello. I asked her if she remembered the gas station. I didn't need an apology. I just wanted to know if she'd ever thought about it. There was a pause. Then she said they were scared, that I'd been misbehaving a lot during the trip, that they overreacted, that it was supposed to be a wake-up call. I told her it wasn't a wake-up call. It was abandonment. It was trauma. It was the day I stopped feeling like I had parents. She started crying again. She said they didn't know how much it hurt me. I asked her if she ever asked me how I felt after that day, if she ever tried to find out what it did to me. She didn't answer. She asked if I would come visit. Not for her, for him. She offered to pay for everything. Flight, hotel, meals, whatever it took. Just a weekend, she said. Just a few hours with him while he was still able to recognize faces. I didn't give her an answer. I told her I'd think about it. After the call, I sat on my bed with the journals and letters spread out in front of me. I started a list on my phone. Not pros and cons, just facts. What happened? What was said? What wasn't said? I needed to see it clearly before I made any decisions. Lucy messaged again the next day. She said my father had asked about me. Not by name, he said, the one who left. She told me not to feel pressure, but she thought I should know. I told her I wasn't going for them. I wasn't going to play happy family or perform forgiveness just because time was running out. If I went, it would be for me. To see with my own eyes if they were still the people who left me, or if I'd finally walked far enough away to not care. I booked a hotel 3 towns over. No return date yet. I'd make that decision later. But I packed my bags. That was the first step. I flew in on a Friday morning. No one knew my flight time. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to the hotel I'd booked 3 towns over. A plain, quiet place near a diner and a pharmacy. No surprises. I checked in under a name slightly different than mine, just in case. The next morning, I got up early, put on neutral clothes, and drove to the hospital without calling ahead. I walked in holding a paper coffee cup I didn't drink from and asked for his room number at the front desk. The nurse looked surprised, asked who I was. I said, his daughter, and nothing else. I found the room. The door was cracked open. My father was half sitting in the bed, hospital blankets pulled to his chest. He looked older than I remembered, frailer. His jaw was sunken, and his skin had turned gray in places. But his eyes still had the same sharpness, the same weight I remembered from every childhood punishment. When he looked at me, there was no warmth, just confusion, then recognition, then a frown. My mother stood by the window. She moved toward me with open arms. I stepped back. I told her I didn't come for hugs. I came for answers. I turned to him and asked if he remembered the gas station. He stared at me, then said, vaguely. I said I remembered every second. The parking lot, the heat, the silence, the hours. He scoffed and muttered, "You're still not over that?" I said, "I was 13. You left me behind." He shifted in the bed, rolled his eyes, and said, "It built character." I didn't speak again. I looked at him for another 5 seconds, then turned and walked out of the room. My mother followed me into the hallway. She asked me what I was doing, why I came if all I wanted was to reopen old wounds. I didn't raise my voice. I just said he was sick now, but I had been a child. I had been hungry, alone, and terrified. She told me I was being cruel. That holding on to things like this was toxic. I told her she called it a grudge, but I called it memory. She didn't respond, just stood there like she expected me to come back. I walked away. That evening, I met Lucy at a cafe near the hotel. She had already ordered us food. She looked nervous, said the whole family was talking about me. Some said they were surprised I came. Others said I must have returned for the inheritance. She rolled her eyes while telling me that. I laughed. I told her I didn't want anything from them. I had my own job, my own savings. I paid off my car 2 years ago. I came back to see if they were even capable of facing what they did. Lucy told me my brother had warned people not to bring up old drama around my dad. That my return was seen as some kind of provocation. She asked if I was okay staying longer. I said I wasn't planning to run. I hadn't traveled this far just to be polite. The next morning, I went back to the hospital. This time, I didn't say anything. I walked into the room, sat down in the chair beside the bed, and stayed there in silence. The TV was on, playing some wildlife documentary. My father didn't acknowledge me, didn't speak, just watched the screen like I wasn't there. Before I left, I stood up and looked at him. I told him I didn't hate him. I just didn't know who he was anymore. He didn't turn, didn't blink. I left without waiting for a response. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a text. It was my sister. Her number was still saved in my phone out of habit. She said I was making a scene, that my presence was upsetting our parents, that the past should stay in the past, that I should stop acting like a victim. I didn't respond right away. I opened my camera roll instead and scrolled until I found the photo I had taken years ago on a return trip through that same gas station. The old metal bench was still there, the faded awning, the sign that said cold drinks, fresh ice. I sent her the photo. The caption said, "You buried me there. I'm just digging myself out." She didn't reply. I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the hotel nightstand. I wasn't there to fight with anyone. I came to say things I should have said years ago. Not for revenge. For release. The next day, I made a list of things I needed to do while I was in town. It wasn't long, but I wanted to finish them before the week ended. The gas station was still on that list. So was the house I grew up in. I didn't know if I'd knock. I just wanted to see it, to look at it from the outside and see what had changed, if anything. But first, I needed to stop by the courthouse. Lucy said she had something to show me, something from back then. Something I didn't know existed. I skipped the hospital the next morning. Instead, I got in the car and drove 45 minutes out of town, past fields and fading billboards, to a place I hadn't seen in 15 years. The gas station was still there, same green awning, same cracked pavement, same flickering sign above the door. Even the metal bench outside looked the same, rusted at the edges, half sunken into the ground from years of weather and weight. Inside, a young man stood behind the counter. I asked if the owner was around. He said he'd be in afternoon. I waited in the parking lot, sitting on that same bench where I had waited all those hours with a bottle of warm water and no clue if anyone was coming back for me. When the owner arrived, he looked older than I expected, but he remembered the story, not my name, not the exact year, but he remembered the police showing up, thinking there had been a kidnapping. He said it had caused a stir in town for weeks. A girl left alone, parents claiming it was punishment. The officers had checked surveillance and asked questions, but no charges had been filed. He said they all thought it was strange then. Still did. I asked if anything like that had happened again. He said no. Nate, not before. Not since. That one stuck with us, he said. None of us forgot it. I thanked him and stepped outside. I took out my phone, hit record, and filmed a short video. No emotion, just facts. I stood in the same spot. I listed the time, the weight, the age I was, what they said after. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I just needed a record that wasn't in someone else's voice. Afterward, I drove to my childhood street. It hadn't changed much. The same row of quiet houses, the same cracked sidewalk where we used to ride bikes. My parents' house still had the same pale yellow paint. The porch swing was still on the front steps. The lawn was neater than I remembered. There was a small ramp leading to the front door now. I parked 2 houses down and waited. A few minutes later, the front door opened. My brother stepped out, carrying a box, looked like adult diapers and medical gloves. He saw the rental car. He looked straight at me. Then he walked up. He asked why I was there. I said, I just wanted to see the house. He said I wasn't welcome unless I was ready to forgive. I told him I wasn't here to forgive. I was here to remember. He didn't like that. He said I was ruining the little time our father had left. That dragging up the past was cruel, that the family didn't need more pain. I asked him a single question. If they had left you at 13, no phone, no ride, no food, would you have just moved on? He didn't answer. He turned around and walked back to the house. I didn't follow. When I got back to the hotel, there was a voicemail waiting. My mother's voice was sharp. She said I was making a circus out of grief, that I was turning their suffering into a performance, that my visit was becoming more harmful than helpful. I didn't call her back. I opened the hotel app and extended my stay by another week. I wasn't done. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't on their timeline anymore. That night, I took out a fresh notebook and wrote a letter to my 13-year-old self. I didn't soften anything. I wrote the truth, word for word, like someone had to read it back to me. The letter started with, "They left you, but you stayed alive." I wrote about the cold metal bench, the store clerk's nervous glances, the way the sun shifted on the concrete while hours passed. I wrote about the phone calls that went unanswered and the way no one even apologized when they finally showed up. Then I wrote about what came after. The snacks I stashed in my closet, the fire escape I practiced climbing down, the way I planned my college escape like it was a jailbreak. I didn't write it to forgive anyone. I wrote it to prove I hadn't imagined any of it, that my memory wasn't broken, that it wasn't too much or too dramatic or too sensitive. It was just real. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in my suitcase. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I wanted it close. Lucy texted me just before midnight. She said she found something important. She asked if I could meet her the next day. She didn't explain, but she sounded serious. I texted her back with a time and place. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and lay still in the dark, waiting for whatever came next. And this time I wasn't afraid to face it. Lucy met me at a library 2 towns over. She came in carrying a small cardboard folder and a tote bag full of notes. She slid the folder across the table before I could even ask what it was. Inside were 4 photocopied pages, yellowed at the edges, stamped with the seal of the local courthouse. The top sheet was labeled, Child Welfare Case Report, Closed. It had my full name typed across the top, along with the date, 16 days after the gas station incident. I flipped through the pages. A caseworker's name, a summary of the complaint. It had come from the police report, filed by the responding officers. Lucy told me she found it in an attic box while going through some of her father's old paperwork. He had worked part-time as a paralegal in the county office during that time. The file had probably been misfiled, mixed in with unrelated documents, and never returned. She nearly threw it out before reading my name. The report called the situation parental overcorrection and cited the lack of prior incidents as the reason no formal charges were pursued. It said the parents involved were advised to seek family counseling and undergo a parenting evaluation. According to the report, both recommendations were declined. The case was marked closed. I stared at the signature at the bottom. A name I didn't know. A decision made without me. A folder of paperwork that had nearly been lost forever. I made a copy at the library and printed it. Then I drove to my parents' house. I didn't knock. I waited in the driveway until my mother came out to collect a package from the porch. She looked surprised when she saw me. I didn't say a word. I handed her the report, folded once and stapled. She opened it slowly, flipping through the pages. Her face changed as she read. She said she didn't know anything had gone that far, that no one had ever told her about a case. I told her that not knowing doesn't make you innocent. It just means you were never paying attention. She tried to take the paper with her into the house. I pulled it back. I told her it was mine now. My proof. My record. The thing no one could rewrite. She didn't argue. She turned around and went back inside. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my brother. He didn't ask about the report. He just said our father was slipping fast. That he had asked if I was coming to say goodbye. I told him no. That goodbye is something you earn by first saying hello, and our father never really had. I ended the call without waiting for his response. That evening, I drove to Lucy's house. We sat on her living room floor with 3 photo albums spread out between us. They were family albums, dozens of birthdays, holidays, summer barbecues, school events. She turned the pages, pointing out people, dates, places, but I wasn't in most of them. One Christmas, the entire family was lined up in front of the fireplace. I wasn't there. In another photo, the cousins were playing board games in the living room. My chair was empty. One album had my name written on the cover, but half the pages were blank. Lucy flipped back and forth. She hadn't noticed it before, she said. How often I was missing, or how often I was there, but cropped out, turned away, or blurred. In some photos, my arm or foot could be seen just at the edge of the frame. Never centered, never part of the moment. She handed me a portable scanner. I spent the next 2 hours scanning every photo I could find where I was present, even barely. I zoomed in on corners, brightened shadows, labeled files with dates, locations, small notes. I saved everything on a flash drive and backed it up to a private folder in the cloud. When we finished, I sat on her couch and organized the files by year. The earliest photo was from when I was 4. The last one was a blurry group shot at my high school graduation. I was standing at the edge of the stage, half cut from the photo. I had been edited out of more than memories. I had been edited out of the history itself. Lucy brought me a box of old journals she found in the attic too. Not mine, her father's legal notes. Inside one, there was a handwritten log of the day the police contacted the county. One line stood out: no follow-up from parents after contact, recommending no further action unless another incident occurs. There never was another incident, at least not one reported. That night, back at my hotel, I uploaded every scan, every journal excerpt, and the report into a locked archive with a personal password. I labeled the folder Existence. I didn't go out for dinner. I didn't answer any calls. I printed one photo from the scans, a faded shot of me in the background at a summer picnic, sitting alone on the swing set. I taped it inside the notebook where I'd written to my 13-year-old self. On the next page, I wrote, "They tried to erase you. They failed." The next morning, I bought a second flash drive, copied the folder to it, and sealed it in a padded envelope addressed to myself. A backup. Because this time, the truth wouldn't go missing. I went back to the hospital just once more. Not for closure. Not for him. I wasn't hoping for peace or a final conversation. I didn't even tell Lucy I was going. I needed to do it for myself, to draw a line between what happened and what happens next. The hallway outside his room was quiet. The nurse on duty gave me a polite nod and returned to her chart. The door was halfway open. I stepped inside. The lights were dim. Machines beeped softly in the background. My father was asleep, or at least unconscious. His skin looked thin, almost translucent, and his hands rested limp at his sides. I pulled a chair beside his bed and placed the printed report on the table, the copy of the dismissed case from Child Protective Services, the one that said parental overcorrection, the one that said recommended counseling declined. I aligned the edges neatly and pressed it flat. Next, I took out the letter I had written to my 13-year-old self, the one I had folded, signed, and sealed in the hotel room. I laid it down beside the report. Then I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and opened the voice recording I made earlier that week at the gas station. It was my voice, speaking slowly, clearly, describing everything. The heat, the weight, the bench, the silence. I pressed play and placed the phone next to his ear. I let it run, uninterrupted. He didn't move. When the recording ended, I stood up, glanced once around the room, and whispered, "You don't get the last word." I do. I walked out without saying goodbye, past the nurses, past the front desk, straight to the parking lot. I got into my car, deleted his number from my phone, and blocked every family group chat I had left open over the years. Back at the hotel, I found a text from Lucy. "Your mom's asking where you went." I didn't reply. I didn't owe anyone my location. Instead, I opened my laptop and submitted a personal essay to a national storytelling podcast. They had a call open for stories about childhood trauma and identity erasure. I formatted everything, changed every name, removed details that could trace back. Not out of fear, out of control. They didn't get the honor of being named. The piece included the gas station, the police report, the photo albums where I was cut out or never included, and the letter to my younger self. I sent it in and shut the laptop. By morning, I had a response. They wanted to feature it in the upcoming season. They said the story was haunting, that it stayed with them. That same morning, my mother emailed me 4 long paragraphs. She wrote about pain, forgiveness, healing. She used phrases like moving forward and letting the past rest. She talked about how hard things had been, about how much my father loved us in his own way, about how everyone makes mistakes. I didn't skim. I read every line. Then I opened a blank reply and typed one sentence: "You don't get to tell me when the past ends." I pressed send. Then I went to the airline app and booked a one-way flight back to the city I lived in. No return ticket. No calls to say I was leaving. I checked out of the hotel, turned in the rental car, and took a cab to the airport. There were no goodbyes at the gate. No one to hug. No one to miss. Everything I had built back home was mine. Not inherited. Not gifted. Not tolerated. I didn't need to explain that to anyone. On the flight, I opened the podcast email again. They asked for a short voice sample to use for production. I recorded it right there in my seat. This is the story of a girl who was left behind, but never disappeared. That night, I walked into my apartment, dropped my bag on the floor, and watered my plants. I turned on music. Not soft, not sad, something loud, something steady. I sat down with a notebook and started writing names, people I owed updates to, people I wanted to see again, people who made space for me. I didn't add my family to the list. The flash drive with my photos and documents was in my coat pocket. I placed it in my fireproof safe, right next to my passport and lease agreement. A new piece of identity, locked in and protected. And for the first time since the gas station, I slept through the night without checking the door. Nothing was forgiven. Nothing had to be. But something was finally finished. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving town. No note, no goodbye. I packed my things the night before, left the hotel key card in the drop box just after sunrise, and drove to the airport in silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of tires on asphalt and the engine humming. On the way, I passed the gas station. The same one with the rusted bench, the crooked ice machine, and the flickering open sign. I didn't pull over this time. I didn't take a photo or slow down. I just looked through the window. It looked smaller than I remembered, almost like it had shrunk. At the airport, my flight was delayed by 90 minutes. I found a corner seat by the windows, opened my laptop, and pulled up the podcast script one last time. I added a final paragraph at the end. What happens when the people who leave you behind expect to be the ones you come back for? Then I hit send. I watched the file upload. The progress bar crept across the screen and then disappeared. It felt like sealing a box and dropping it in the ocean. Whatever happened next was no longer mine to hold. Just before boarding, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lucy. He passed an hour ago. I stared at it for a full minute. I didn't reply. I didn't freeze or panic or cry. I just sat there, letting the quiet settle in. Then, for the first time in a long time, I felt something lift. Not because he was gone, but because I didn't have to wait anymore. I boarded without checking my phone again. I found my seat by the window, buckled in, and watched as the city below faded. The houses turned to grids, the streets to ribbons. I looked down, but I didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind. That place was never home. It was just where I started. A week later, the podcast went live. I didn't tell anyone I was the voice in the episode. I didn't post it anywhere. I just waited. By that afternoon, my anonymous inbox had filled with messages, dozens, then hundreds. A woman wrote that her parents left her at a rest stop when she was 9. Another said her mother punished silence harder than any mistake. One man wrote that he had kept food under his bed for years, just in case. I read every single message, slowly, carefully. Some of them were just one sentence, "This was my story too." I cried for them, not out of pity, but for recognition. For how many people had been told their memory was too much, too dramatic, too emotional, and had believed it. Lucy called a few days later. She sounded tired. She said the will had been read. Everything, money, property, assets, was left to my mother and my brother. Not a mention of me. Not even in a footnote. I told her that was fine. I had already inherited what I needed, the truth. She asked if she could come visit sometime. Not for a reunion. Just to see the life I had built. I said yes. Because not everyone who comes from poison stays poisonous. Some of us grow in spite of it. That same week, I sorted through the physical things I had taken back with me, the letters, the photos, the journals, the documents. I donated the full digital archive to a women's center that supports teens aging out of foster care. I labeled the folder proof you existed, even when no one looked. They accepted it with thanks and said they'd use it as part of a mentorship program. I asked them to keep the names anonymous. Hi. They understood. A few nights later, I walked down to the lake near my apartment. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. I brought the final printed copy of the Child Protective Services report. I lit a match, held it to the edge, and watched the paper curl into black ash. I scattered the remains over the water. Not to forget, but to mark the ending. I wasn't carrying it anymore. For years, I thought healing would be loud. A scream. A confrontation. Fireworks. But it turned out to be quiet, like turning off a fan you didn't know had been running in the background your whole life. When I was 13, they left me at a gas station as a lesson. They thought I'd break, or come back smaller. But I learned more than they ever expected. I learned how to leave. And this time, I did it for good.